Well, here we are with Proverbs 21. I had to double check real quick, make sure I was on the right one. So, in this one, a lot of good advice about the importance of righteousness in our life and really mercy as well. This is such an important point, especially in today's world, to understand we should seek after mercy, not justice. Justice is something that God handles. We're not to handle that. So let's get in here. Verse 1, the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord as the rivers of water. He turneth it whithersoever he will. So saying that, this is kind of interesting because it's saying that the Lord is control of the king's heart or his emotions. And I don't think this is completely accurate in here. Be interesting to look back on. It doesn't change it much in the revised version, but you know, God exerts influence on us, but he doesn't control us. And I think that's an important point to look at verse 1 is it's not saying that the Lord controls the king through his emotions, but he is guiding the king. Basically, the king still has his agency to choose to accept or reject God's influence. Basically, that's important. Agency is super important to God. Verse 2, every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord pondereth the hearts. I like this verse a lot because it's so true. When we do things, we have to understand that we operate in the world from a standpoint of our perception. Okay, it's rare if we actually interact with the world directly and literally. What we do is we interact with our perception or belief of the world. So like a map. If you ever pulled out a paper map, I know for millennials or people that are younger, you probably haven't done much with paper maps. Get them out and look at them. Okay, paper maps are a great tool to use to help you navigate areas where you're unfamiliar because the map will show you where to go and what to do to help you out. The problem is maps eventually get outdated. Even GPS systems will get outdated, and maybe there's new construction or there's changes or things that have happened that the map won't show. So we always have to realize the map is not the territory. We can follow the map, but it doesn't accurately reflect the reality all the time. So when those two are in confusion, we should consider looking at reality more than the map. Now, this is a good metaphor for us to understand our beliefs. We go through life believing what we believe, believing we're going in a good direction. And yet sometimes we're not going in a good direction. This happens all the time when you look at cults or you look at religious movements or political movements or things where they believe they are the righteous. They're doing what is right. The Crusaders thought they were doing what's right. In the name of God, we are going to be victorious and win. Israel, in the Old Testament, we see that. And yet they were wrong. They believed they were right, but yet they were actually wrong. So this happens in our life too. Sometimes we strive so hard to do what's right, we end up being wrong. And usually that happens when we're not willing to learn and improve our map of reality. We're not willing to understand that maybe I am right, maybe I am wrong. In order for me to find the truth, I have to admit that I might be wrong. My understanding of the truth might not be correct, and I need to be willing to explore new options to help me to be better. That is how we find truth. We don't find truth by learning something and then never questioning it. We learn truth by wondering, maybe what I know isn't 100% true. Maybe there's more to this truth. And I need to be willing to explore other ideas to help me to think through this better so I can understand more truth. So it's an important point for us. And the beauty of this phrase here is the Lord pondereth the hearts. So he is dealing with our emotions. He's dealing with our internal thoughts and ideas, our beliefs. Even though we may believe we're right, he knows inside what's really going on with us. So sometimes that can be different. Sometimes leaders will exude a persona that they are in control and everything is happy and wonderful. And inside, they are freaking out. So this is just interesting how what the average person perceives is not the same as what God perceives. I like that verse. Verse 3, now to do justice and judgment is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. So obedience is more important than sacrifice. We learn that from the Old Testament. Verse 4, and high look and a proud heart and the plowing of the wicked is sin. Makes sense. Pride, greed, getting involved in wicked activities or things that you shouldn't be getting into is really good. Verse 5, the thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but every one that is hasty only to want. So interesting idea that they bring up in here. In verse 5 in the New Revised Version says, the plans of the diligent lead surely to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to want. So those who are working hard, those who are striving to accomplish things, plan ahead, have a tendency to have abundance. Those who are only focusing on what their wants, their desires, they tend to have more problems, basically. If you react instead of act, then you're going to have more problems. Verse 6, the getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a vanity tossed to and fro of them that seek death. The robbery of the wicked shall surely destroy them, because they refuse to do judgment. So again, deceit. This is what this is talking about. If you are deceiving people, you're going to get your just dues. It's not a good long-term strategy. Like verse 8, the way of man is froward and strange, but as for the pure, his work is right. So if you're trying to do what you want to do all the time, if you're trying to say, my truth is the important truth, and impose your truth on other people, that's when you run into problems. Truth has to be something that exists outside of us. If it only exists within inside me, it's an opinion. If it exists in a place where both you and I can objectively say, yes, we agree to this, that's truth. We have to realize this. Verse 9, it is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. This verse gets lots of attention sometimes from kind of satirical ideas. This is a funny one. In fact, even in the New Revised Edition, it says it is better to live in a corner of the housetop than in a house shared with a contentious wife. Now realize back in these days, these Old Testament days, they didn't have sloped roofs like what we have today because they didn't have snowpack to deal with. We're talking Middle Eastern area. They didn't have the snowpack like what we have today. So a lot of these roofs are flat, and there's basically like you can hang out up there. You can practically live on top of your house. If you set up some awnings, basically it's like a sunroom up there. So it's better to live up there in one corner only rather than live in the rest of your house with a contentious woman. While I do think that I think this is a one-sided argument that's in here that they're making. I don't think it's completely accurate, basically, because I think this can be taken both ways. But when we look at this, I mean, obviously, anybody who's contentious, you're gonna have problems, and any guy will tell you, especially a married guy, that if the whole concept of happy wife, happy life, that's kind of what it's getting at, is not we should ignore women when they have concerns or challenges. I believe most of the time when women become contentious, it's because they feel slighted. They feel like they're undervalued in a discussion or an argument, or things are going on in their life. And so we should be more ready to acknowledge women and women's opinions and help them to be equal in marriage and decisions in marriage and everything else. So I think there's kind of a broader perspective and idea we can take of this verse, which is an important one to consider. Now verse 10, the soul of the wicked desireth evil. His neighbor findeth no favor in his eyes. When the scorner is punished, the simple is made wise, and when the wise is instructed, he receiveth knowledge. So this is kind of interesting. And we get into verse 12 a little bit with this too. The righteous man wisely considereth the house of the wicked, but God overthroweth the wicked for their wickedness. So these three verses kind of tie together, understanding that wickedness isn't something that we necessarily do explicitly. Wickedness is something that comes from deep within. The reason we do wicked things is because we believe in our inside. We have a belief about ourselves and the world that allows us to do that wickedness. That's where it comes from. That's what it's talking about here. The soul of the wicked desireth evil. So deep down inside, their beliefs about themselves, their beliefs about the world allow them to do wickedly. And that's the problem, is it's a deeper, wickedness is more of a deeper seated issue, which is why repentance, it talks about remorse. It talks about improving yourself and change, because you have to change the inner self. And if you don't have that remorse, you don't have a change inside going on. You can be remorseful because you got caught, but to be truly remorseful, you have to be able to understand the other side of the equation, not just your side, but their side. So that's an important point that it's looking at in here. And that, of course, a lot of times wickedness tends to be more short-sighted. So people who are learning truth tend to take more of a longer-term perspective of things and the greater perspective of things, rather than just my perspective on things, basically. So let's go to verse 13. Whoso stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. Verse 13 is karma. Basically, if you're not willing to help other people, then don't expect to get help when you need it as well. That's an important point. Verse 14, a gift in secret pacifieth anger, and a reward in the bosom strong wrath. I want to hear what you think about verse 14. My ideas, and if you want to pause this, put in your comments, and then start it up again, you can. It's interesting as they look at this that, helping people, giving a gift, if you're giving somebody a gift in secret, it helps pacify their anger. They probably feel slighted, and they probably feel there's something wrong. And so giving a gift to them might be you apologizing. Hey, look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Oh, okay. Now we're getting better at this, or something like that. Verse 15, it is joy to the just to do judgment, but destruction shall be to the workers of iniquity. So, and I think we tend to look at verse 15, that first half. It is joy to the just to do judgment. So when we believe we are just, when we believe we are on the right side of that line and the other people on the bad side, we like judgment. We hate it when it's the other way around. If we're the ones that cause the problem, then judgment is hard. So it's interesting how they're talking about this. It is, if you feel you're just, then judgment seems right. If you realize you're not just, then judgment doesn't make sense. I think in the sense of a lot of abuse victims, there's a common trend that I've seen in people I've worked with in the past, that when they really explore it, oftentimes they realize that their abuser was abused. And now, instead of seeking justice against their abuser, when they realize that their abuser is just as much of a victim as they are, they change their attitude a lot of times. They don't like what happened, and they still believe that there should be some retribution or some kind of punishment come to that person for what they did to them. But yet they're not willing to throw the whole book at them, because they realize that they're not completely, they're just a victim too. And that adds mercy to it. And so they realize, oh, we don't need to blame them too much. There should be something, but not as much as what I was thinking before. So it's fascinating. It's hard. The thing to realize about verse 15 in that phrase is, who is just? How do we determine who is just? Is a key thing to always think about. Now, verse 16, the man that wandereth out of the way of understanding shall remain in the congregation of the dead. That one sounds really strange. The man that wandereth out of the way of understanding shall remain in the congregation of the dead. So this is kind of a weird thought, but I think what it's really getting at here is, of course, if you are going away from truth, if you know that is bad, that is wrong, but you go another way, you're going to find yourself in a bad spot. Remain in the congregation of the dead. If you, oh, I know this is bad, but I'm going to do it anyways, well, you might find yourself dead. You can't defy it. You can disagree with gravity all you want, but it still works. So kind of interesting idea there. Verse 17, he that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. He that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich. The wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous, and the transgressors for the upright. Now, 18 sounds really interesting, and in fact, there's almost no change in the New Revised Edition. Uh, why would wicked be a ransom for the righteous? I want to hear what you have to say on that one. In what way is wickedness ransom for the righteous? Put that in the comments. Look forward to that. Again, if you want to pause this, put down your comments and come back, you can. I kind of look at this more on the idea of, well, okay, so in traditional Christianity, there's kind of a philosophy that exists that says, the atonement is so important in our lives, and the atonement came about because of our wickedness. So if none of us were wicked, there would be no atonement, and technically speaking. And so I think that's kind of what it's talking about here is in order for us to be righteous, to show that we are blameless, there's somebody to blame. The wicked did it the wrong way. I did it the right way. I'm the victim. I think it's kind of what that's getting at a little bit. So I don't know if I completely agree with that, but it's here. Verse 19, it is better to dwell in the wilderness than with a contentious and angry woman. So here's that phrase again, and it came up one more time, and I think this is the same as the other one as well, of understanding that it's, I would say as a man that dealing with a woman who's really mad is not a pretty sight, and a woman who wants to fight, who wants to just be contentious and angry and hateful, not a good situation. Just don't even bother going home. Just stay away. But again, there's a greater discussion here on why is that woman so contentious? Probably because she feels like she's not being adequately respected and taken care of. So I think there's more to that, basically. And realize again, most of the scriptures are more male directed, so we have to kind of think about it and realize too, on this flip side, a man who's always angry is not worth living with. And I'm sure every woman out there would agree with me on that. A man that's always angry, whether that's a drunk angry all the time or just angry, just a hatred person, you don't want to be around him. You don't want to live with that person. So we can take this one both ways. Verse 20, there is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up. So this is interesting because we're kind of flipping some of the things that they talked about earlier about treasure and oil. There is treasure and there is oil, even though it said before, ignore the worldly treasures and worldly oils and riches. There is value in those who are wise, in learning principles and ideas. But they're just saying, if you're a foolish person, you tend to leverage the truth and leverage information for your betterment to enrich yourself, whereas a wise person's more going to see it as an objective thing. How can I employ this not only help me, but help others out as well? Verse 21, he that followeth after righteousness and mercy findeth life, righteousness and honor. Good advice. A wise man scaleth the city of the mighty, and casteth down the strength of the confidence thereof. Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles. Boy, that's a big one. Verse 23. If you can control your tongue, there is nothing in this world that you cannot control. So controlling your tongue, if you can control what you say and not say the things you're thinking when you wish you could say them, but control yourself and how you represent to others, you're powerful. That's some major maturity, even emotional maturity, to show that you are willing to understand, I want to say this certain thing, but that's not appropriate. And so that's a good self-regulation in there. Verse 25, desire of the slothful killeth him, for his hands refuse to labor. Yeah, those who don't want to tend to live bad lives. They don't have fancy stuff. They don't have nice things because, again, they're not willing to work for it. Verse 26, he coveteth greedily all the day long, but the righteous giveth and spareth not. That's that Master Mahan principle. Are you focusing on how can I gain value for myself, or are you focused on how can I give value to others? Sacrifice of the wicked is abomination. This is verse 27. How much more when it bringeth it with a wicked mind, when he bringeth it with a wicked mind. So this is a good point to realize, Kate. If we sacrifice, if we perform our religious oblations, we go through the motions of doing the religious performances, but we do it not with righteousness in mind. We're not doing it to praise God or to enrich ourselves with Him. We're doing it because it's the cultural thing to do. That's where problems arise. That's what that's getting at, basically, is understand when you are, to put it in more modern terms, if you are Mormon by culture rather than Mormon by faith, you have problems. And when whole wards and stakes, when whole groups have this mentality, lots of problems will arise. So it's not about acting Christian or whatever, it's about being inside. That makes the bigger difference. So be careful with that. Let's see, verse 28, a false witness shall perish, but the man that heareth speaketh constantly. That can happen. A wicked man hardeneth his face, but as for the upright, he directeth his way. There is no wisdom, nor understanding, nor counsel against the Lord. The horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord. This sometimes can happen. We tend to have this idea that we think we know what's right. We are prepared for battle. We're prepared to fight for our rights or our beliefs. But yet when we really turn to the Lord's going, I don't want you to fight. That's not what I want you to do. You're just killing your brothers and sisters. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to be safe. I want you to work together to find ways of doing things that does not require fighting. So God's wisdom is different than our wisdom. Hopefully that's very apparent from this proverb that we've heard here. Some interesting points and ideas we've gone through. So let's wrap this up and jump over to our next proverb to continue to learn more.